The 622nd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered. Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
Oh, they're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love. Top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Wednesday night, and we got a fun one to talk about. Carolina goes on the road into Lexington, Kentucky, and they beat the Kentucky Wildcats last night in the ACC-SEC Challenge to improve to 7-1 and did a lot of impressive things in the process that we're going to talk a lot about. I think there's a lot of talking points coming out of this game. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll hear from head coach Hubert Davis on the whim. We'll give our stat of the game, hand on our game balls, and so much more. But let's go ahead and get right into this one. As I mentioned, Carolina goes on the road into Rupp. They beat Kentucky 67-64 to improve to 7-1. Now Carolina has secured wins over Kansas and Kentucky in the non-conference portion of the season. Last time Carolina beat both of those teams in the same year was 1981-1982. Carolina would win the national championship. This was the first win for Carolina at Rupp since 2007. The win improves Carolina to 2-1 here in the early going in quad one games. And they climbed 11 spots in the net. They're up to 15th in the net rankings after last night's win. That's higher than they were at any point in the season last year. They were led by the front court duo of Caleb Wilson and Henry Bassar, both recording monster double-doubles, steadying Carolina on a night where offense was hard to come by. But it was the freshman, Derek Dixon, who came to the rescue, getting 2 big shots in the final minute to help Carolina with the victory. And it was a game that was headlined by defense. Carolina held Kentucky without a field goal for over 10 minutes in the second half. A pretty impressive thing to do there, no matter the level of opponent, no matter if it's home or away. But the fact you do it on the road against a ranked opponent, all the more impressive. And we talked about going into the game how rebounding was going to be a challenge. This was the third or fourth best defensive rebounding team in the country, were Kentucky, but they gave up 20 offensive rebounds to Carolina, and they converted that into 22 second chance points. And all of that equals up to not the prettiest win. It's nowhere near as pretty as maybe we thought it would have been when we picked Carolina to win the game. But I think all things considered, on the road, you're down a starter against a rival. You can make the argument that this is the most satisfying win here in the early going of the 2025-2026 season.
It's huge. I mean, I think that it's bigger than the win over Kansas, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, so I'll explain that a little bit more then. But for this group, I think to be able to win a game of this significance on the road, it's your first true road game that you played so far this year, and you did not play a great game. I mean, this is, as you said, this is one of the ugliest wins that we've seen in a while out of Carolina when it's come to these types of games. But the most important thing that you did was you won a big game. We have said so many times over these last few years, and we said it at throughout the start of this year. Can you win me a big game? Can you win me one of the, we're used to playing in them, but can you find a way to win one of them? And Michigan State felt like an opportunity. Kansas was definitely a big game because it was at home. But Michigan State really felt like that big opportunity because it was neutral site. And for sure that was going to be a game that, I mean, I'm pretty positive right now, especially with what we've seen from every team that Michigan State's played this year of significance. Now they have a test coming up against Duke, but I'm pretty sure that was going to remain top 50. I feel really confident in that. So if Carolina had been able to win that game, man, we're talking about Carolina really chugging along here, 3-0 in quad one. And all of a sudden, I mean, any talks of missing the NCAA tournament pretty much out the window. This game, though, to rebound from that Michigan State game because you lost that one, it just felt like Carolina finally seized an opportunity. And, what was amazing was, you went through that stretch in the second half where Kentucky couldn't hit a field goal. Well, during the middle of that stretch, there was a point where it was like 8 minutes into that stretch where they didn't hit a field goal. And Carolina was still down 6. They could not find a way to do anything on the offensive end to be able to help themselves to claw back into the game. And then magically, Carolina suddenly finds that spark that they needed, and they're able to hit a couple of shots. All of a sudden, Kentucky, is starting to throw up some bad looks. And Carolina did everything that they needed to do. The offensive glass dominance was tremendous. I mean, that was from the word go. That was the one thing that you couldn't question. And the reason why Carolina was in the game at halftime, why they were in the game late, was because they just got to the offensive boards like we haven't seen them this season. I mean, 20 offensive rebounds is insane, especially against the fourth best defensive rebounding team in the country coming in. I mean, they had 22 defensive rebounds to Carolina's 20 offensive rebounds. It's a phenomenal ratio for Carolina. And Caleb Wilson, incredibly impactful in that area on the glass. Henry Vassar, very impactful there as well. But both guys also, did what they had to do scoring-wise. For Caleb Wilson, wasn't pretty, but it certainly was what Carolina needed. So, I mean, yeah, you see, a couple of guys that step up. Luka Bogovac hit a couple of big shots for Carolina, even though he didn't necessarily have the greatest night. But then it's Derek Dixon. Out of all the guys that you could have picked on this team, I don't know where you would have had Derek Dixon in the pecking order. What, maybe 7th in terms of the guys that could be able to rescue you in a game like this? He hits a massive 3 and then drives by his defender thanks to a screen from Henry Vassar. But, Malachi Moreno, as you mentioned when we were talking about it during the game, has to stay up, can't drop like he would normally do with any other big man. And it allows Derek Dixon, as quick a foot as he is, to get by him and finish at the rim. 2 massive shots for Carolina. And we would have thought that would be Caleb Wilson that we'd be talking about hitting massive shots as a true freshman for Carolina. But credit to Derek Dixon. He was the hero that Carolina needed in this game, and he comes through in a big time to give Carolina a massive victory that gives them another quad one win that isn't going away anytime soon, because Kentucky, even if they struggle, they are not going to fall below 75th, barring a historically bad season.
Yeah, and the thing about this game, more than anything, is you reference or we reference the Roy Williams quote all the time. Everything feels better when the ball goes in the basket, and that's really how I think you come away from this game. Because had Carolina lost, we would have been talking about a massive blown opportunity because of the way they just defended and the fact that you held a power conference opponent, a ranked opponent, without a field goal for 10 minutes, but yet you still had to eke out a victory. But that's not the case. Carolina made the plays down the stretch they had to make to win the game. That's something they failed to do a year ago this time of the year. Carolina played some really close games in November and December a year ago, but their late game execution wasn't up to par, and it's why they lost the games that they lost. Michigan State, among some Florida, among others. That's something that we've seen Carolina here in the early going. They executed down the stretch the way they had to against Kansas. They do so here tonight or last night against Kentucky. Both those things propelled them to massive victories, but because this was going to be a game where, quite honestly, wasn't frustrated with the effort. I thought the effort was there, and I thought the effort's been there a lot of times. We had to come on here and recap the loss, but we've had to say this is why Carolina didn't get the job done, and I was really glad to see Carolina make winning plays and afford us the ability to come on here and talk about a win. I know Kentucky's beat up. I know Kentucky's banged up. And maybe if they're healthy, who knows? Maybe this game goes a different way. But you could also tell that was a team that on their home floor, behind their home crowd, there was a level of desperation to get that win because for them, their schedule doesn't ease up. They've got massive game after massive game coming up after this, and that program now falls to 0-3 against power conference competition. And that's not what that fan base expected when they spent $22 million on their roster. And so I think some people are trying to poke holes in the way Carolina had to win. But regardless, they made plays that this group has not yet made to win a ball game. And they made the plays last night. Now there'll be that confidence the next time they're in a tight game that they can make winning plays late, whether they're at home, where I think this team is definitely going to be the best version of themselves, or if they're on the road like they were last night in an environment like Rep Arena, which was as hostile a road environment we've seen so far here in the entirety of the college basketball season. Let's take a look at the box score here, and I'll pull it up for you guys that are watching at home. Y'all can look at it with us as I run through it. Carolina shoots just 41% from the field. They were 26 of 64. Meanwhile, Kentucky shoots 43%. They were 23 of 53. Both teams struggled from the outside. Carolina just 6 of 20 from deep. How about Kentucky? Just 1 of 13 from behind the three-point line for 8%. Carolina not sharp at the foul line, 9 of 15, just 60% there. Kentucky much more effective. It was their offense for the majority of the second half. They go 17 of 22 from the stripe. Turnovers, Carolina committed 12 turnovers. That led to 13 Kentucky points. On the other side, Carolina forced 9 turnovers, but scored just 7 off of them. You mentioned the rebounding numbers. Carolina won the battle of the boards 41-30. They got rebounded on the defensive glass. It was 22-21, but they made for it on the offensive glass with 20 offensive rebounds compared to just 8 for the Wildcats. That led to 22 second chance points. Meanwhile, Kentucky, they had just 5 second chance points. The bench points, Carolina got a lift from their bench. It was 17-16 in favor of Carolina. Points in the paint did go Kentucky's way, 42-34. So did fast break points. It was 13-6. They did outblock Carolina as well, 7-2. They did outsteal Carolina, 8-5. But the Heels had 13 assists on 26 made baskets. Kentucky with just 8 assists on their 23 made baskets. The game was tied 9 times. There were 14 different lead changes. All in all, Carolina led for just 8.5 minutes, but it was enough to come away with the victory. Before we get to the quote of the game that you'll hear from Hubert Davis, just wanted to touch, because I didn't put this down, in one of the main takeaways. but I thought it was worth noting. Carolina's three-point shooting, nothing to write home about. 6 of 20, can't brag about that. But it felt like every time they needed a three, they got one. You got two big ones from Jonathan Powell in the first half, including one out of that timeout where Jared Stevenson fell on the loose ball. And then you got two in the final 3 minutes, both out of timeouts. One on a set play where Hubert Davis got Luka Bogovac the ball in the left corner. Luka tough enough to make the shot. And then you got Derek Dixon, his go-ahead three that gave Carolina the 64-62 lead. Yeah, the initial play broke down, but I have to imagine that the conversation in the huddle was, if the play's not there, then you need to be willing to take this shot, and you got to be tough enough to make the shot. The perimeter shooting is something that needs to come along. Carolina's got to start shooting the basketball better. But in a game like last night that was so rugged, timely offense was the most important, and it felt like Carolina's perimeter offense was there to answer the call whenever they needed to make a perimeter shot or two.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, first half, it was really Jonathan Powell sustaining Carolina, hitting a couple of shots that allowed Carolina to sort of gain some momentum offensively. And then, Luka, I mean, every three-point shot that Luka hit felt big. It felt like every single one of them that was going down, it was, keeping Carolina around, or it was starting a run for Carolina, doing something that was positive for Carolina. And, the big shot towards the end of the game from him was huge because, I mean, it would have been easy. I mean, he was not having a great night. And we were pointing that out ourselves that, this is not great for Luka. I mean, there's been some moments in this game, but it hasn't been super efficient. That shot was huge because, not only does it get him to double figures, but really, I mean, that's where you started to feel like Carolina had a realistic chance to actually win the game. And then Derek Dixon's shot was just amazing. I mean, the stones to take that shot as a freshman with all the other guys on the floor, it would have been very easy to say, dude, look, I know that I can take this shot, but I'm looking around at everybody else. I'm looking at a big night from Henry Visar. I'm looking at a big night from Caleb Wilson. Big-ish still, even though it wasn't great. But I'm looking around at some of these other guys, and they've hit big shots. Luka just hit a big shot, so maybe I should try to get it to them. Instead, he said, no, this is on me to take this shot. I've got to be good enough to knock it down, and he does. So, I mean, that was one thing. It's not like Carolina is shooting lights out from the perimeter, and you are right. That is an area you have to get better in because it just seems like every game it's trending in the wrong direction for Carolina. But man, when you needed it last night, it showed up. And that's the one thing that, if you're going to do throughout the season, even if it's not going to be pretty, as long as you're going to have timely shooting that allows you to be able to win games, then, hey, we'll suffer through it. I know it's going to be, it might take a couple of years off of your life because there'll be a lot of close games. But if this is what's going to happen when clutch time rolls around, is that these guys are going to show up from the perimeter and that's when they're going to make their shots, I would much rather that than hitting a bunch of meaningless threes early in the game and still finding a way to lose to a team like Kentucky.
All right, let's get to the head coach, Hubert Davis, who I'm going to give him his flowers here a little bit later on in the show. But he spoke after the game. You can imagine the topic of discussion was his freshman, Derek Dixon, making the shots, making the plays to propel Carolina to a victory. Here's what the head coach of the Tar Heels had to say about the reserve guard stepping up in a big way in Carolina's road win.
He's a big guard, and so we were having trouble, especially in the first half, guarding their pick-and-roll action, keeping them out of the paint. They had 42 points in the paint. It felt like 30 points in the paint in the first half, but I thought he did a really good job defensively. Containing the dribble drive, keeping them out of the lane and making them take tough shots, rebounding the basketball, and then him just running the team. There was situations where we ran a play and we just didn't get what we were looking for. And in those times, you see players step up and make plays, and Derek made a number of them. I'm really happy for him.
That was, I think, the most impressive thing about him last night. Probably the hesitation that Hubert Davis will have to play him more minutes is the fact that I don't know how good he is defensively. That's the one area that Kyan Evans, I think, has excelled at for the majority of the season. There's no denying, though, that there's just a different confidence level with Derek Dixon on the floor than there is with Kyan Evans right now. He looks more sure of himself. He's not afraid to be aggressive. I mean, he took 8 shots last night. He wasn't afraid to force the issue, even when shots didn't go down, even when he made a mistake or two. There was just a mental toughness to respond in ways that you haven't seen from Kyan Evans this year, that you didn't see from Elliot Cadeau at times last year. And to do this on the road in that moment last night just speaks volumes about the player that I think he's going to start becoming, because no matter if he gets moved to the starting lineup, no matter what, I think he had his first Carolina moment, and he feels like this is going to be a guy that's going to be here for a handful of years. You expect him to have more Carolina moments in the years to come, but everything that Hubert Davis said there, I agreed with. I loved what he was able to do defensively. I thought there was a willingness there to try to keep the ball in front of him. Really good, I thought, in pick and rolls. I thought he communicated really, really well. But more importantly, on the offensive end, yeah, we could talk about the shots, and those are the most important, but it was just running everything and getting Carolina organized and getting guys the ball where they want it and so on and so forth. He looked like a point guard. He played like a point guard, and he played so well that I think we're going to have to probably discuss, should he be this team's point guard moving forward? Because for as rough as Carolina's offense was at times last night, their best offense came with Derek Dixon on the floor, and we saw that throughout the majority of the game.
Yeah, and we're trending in that direction. I mean, you go back to the last game. I mean, Derek Dixon was starting to play a little bit more. It felt like he was in there a little bit later in certain circumstances that we were saying, hey, this is noteworthy. This is something that, against Michigan State doesn't mean nothing. And now you see it in the game against Kentucky, and you see the way that he played. I mean, yeah, offensively, the scoring stuff was amazing. I mean, that's something that you just can't teach. I love the confidence. That was something that you just never saw. As you mentioned, never saw it from Elliot Cadeau last year. We have not seen it from Kyan Evans for most of the early part of this season. And I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking for those guys. And that's the reason why I believe that he is probably the best option at point guard for Carolina moving forward. When you have a guy that's that confident in himself that he's going to be able to make plays, I think you've got someone that is primed to run this offense. And the biggest thing is, for me, I mean, you said on the defensive end of the floor, Kyan Evans has been playing well. He has for most of the year. But again, most of the season was against some weaker opponents. Didn't think he was great the other day against Michigan State on Thanksgiving. I did not think he was great at containing Jeremy Fears. I thought some of the switches he got caught up in, there wasn't great communication. Where in this game, I mean, you saw, he was getting bullied in the first half. Just bullied in the paint, and especially when they got switches, that it was almost impossible for him to not get back down into the post and allow a pretty easy paint score. You did not see that when Derek Dixon came into the game. You saw there was much more resistance. Yeah, maybe it is his frame, but I mean, look, Kyan Evans is still 6'3". It's not like he's a small guy, but Derek Dixon, just for some reason, was able to provide more resistance, played with a little more physicality to his game. That's certainly something that I think we want to see. And so I think he's a guy that's going to continue to grow as the season goes along. We thought that anyways, but I think we thought it was going to come off the bench. I think now you have got to the point where unless Kyan Evans really shows out in the next game or two, then I think you probably are going to roll with Derek Dixon. And the thing is that the next game's not easy. Like, people may look at that game and think, oh, yeah, it's just Georgetown. It's really not that difficult. It's at home. We should be able to win that game. Yeah, you should be able to win that game. But that's a much better team than the Georgetown of the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how Hubert Davis handles that. At the least, I think you've gotten to the point where Kyan Evans and Derek Dixon probably going to be a pretty even split in terms of minutes on the floor for Carolina at that point guard spot.
Yeah, let's get through the stat of the game, then let's just go ahead and get right into that discussion. Stat of the game, pretty easy. I went offensive rebounds. Carolina, plus 12 in that category, 20 offensive boards on the road against a top 5 defensive rebounding team, against a top 5 rebounding team. More importantly, limiting Kentucky to just 8 offensive rebounds. That's something Mark Pope talked about in his post game, where he said, "Look, that's not who we've been. That's not who we are. We've got to get back to getting to the board. If Carolina does an offensive rebound that way, there's no way they come away with the win as good as they were defensively, even in the second half." So let's just get right into it. When I wrote down under the takeaway part of the document, I wrote Derek Dixon makes his case to be point guard one, and I definitely feel that. I know I said a lot of the things about Kyan Evans, a lot. And I talked Kyan Evans up as much as anybody, I think, in the Carolina basketball community that has the platform that I have. But he's not playing winning basketball. And look, I know Hubert has talked about his defense and him running the team, and some of the things he talked about with Derek. He's kind of come to the defense of Kyan at different times when he's been asked about him, but he hasn't been the Kyan Evans that Carolina thought they were getting out of Colorado State. They brought him in to put the ball in the basket, and he looks hesitant to shoot the ball. He doesn't have any confidence in his shot. And when he's not scoring, he's not playing to the fullest of his potential. And I think he doesn't impact the game the way Derek Dixon does. I just looked at Derek Dixon last night, and I thought that was a guy that was a lot more calm, a lot more sure of himself, knew where to be, where to go, where to get his teammates the basketball, so on and so forth. I think you like his size. I think he can, the more that he plays, I think he'll get better defensively. But I also think the best part about putting him in the starting lineup means I think you can play Kyan Evans off of him. Because here's the thing about the Kyan Evans discussion. As much as we can bash him for not being what we thought he was going to be, like Myron Goodman, a lot of people have, and you can't run away from that. He's not been good. Carolina needs him. Like, if Carolina's going to ascend to the team we've talked about them being, there's not a situation where that happens where Kyan Evans isn't playing a big part of that. I just wonder, is this a guy better fit to play off the ball where you just run him screen after screen after screen? And you saw some of the screen action, some of the chin action they got Jonathan Powell with open last night. That's in Carolina's arsenal to really free up shooters at the elbow. Could you get him to just be a guy that you're running and become a catch-and-shoot three-point man, and a guy that when he gets it, maybe can put some pressure on the rim with some driving lanes, so on and so forth. Hubert Davis talks about wanting to play with two guards, point guards at all times. He's much more of a natural ball handler than Seth Trimble is, so you could achieve him playing off the ball with Derek Dixon. But, there's just sometimes you look at a player and you can just feel it. And I'm not saying that Kyan Evans has been as bad as Larry Drew the second was during his last year with the program, but you could tell when Larry Drew was on the court and when Kendall Marshall came in off the bench, there was a difference. There was a different life. There's a different energy to Carolina's offense. Is it that drastic with Evans and Derek Dixon? No, it's not. But there is just something there when Derek Dixon's on the floor. You feel a lot more confident about what Carolina can be offensively. And so, look, there's 5 days in between games. You have to imagine that when Hubert Davis and his staff, they sat down after this game, they reevaluated the tape, and they really were talking out loud. The discussion of moving Derek Dixon into that starting lineup had to come up probably the first or second thing when they recapped this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to, because the way that he played, it just leads to that conversation naturally. I mean, you guys that are coaching this backcourt, and then Hubert Davis have to just look at it and say, this is probably what's best for the team right now. And the thing is that, Kyan Evans isn't playing just downright horrible in terms of the way that pretty much everything else that he's doing. I didn't think he was great defensively last night. I didn't think he was great against Michigan State, as I said. But I don't think he's a complete negative in that area. When I look at him as a guy that shares the basketball, I mean, in this game, didn't really do much. That was what was so shocking about last night, was that last night he did absolutely nothing in terms of impacting the game. 2 points, 1 assist. He didn't turn the ball over. That's good. But he didn't have a steal. So there was nothing that he was really contributing. I mean, the defensive end, and you can't go just off of steals. But, we watched him play defensively. There just wasn't an impact coming from him. But I think for the most part, you look at the games that he's played so far this year, there have been some up and downs. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster. There have been some really nice highs for him to where you see some of the potential. You see what Carolina was looking at when they brought him in, and you get those flashes of a confident player. And you wonder, if you play him off ball, is that going to be easier where he becomes basically a catch and shoot type player? And that allows his 3-point shooting to really be the strength. That was something that he did a decent amount of last year at Colorado State because of how they ran things over there. He was able to catch and shoot at times, something that he just doesn't feel like he's been able to necessarily do that here early in the season. And, part of it is that his guys just aren't getting him the basketball in certain areas. The other part of it, he's not demanding the basketball in certain times. And, we need that perimeter shooter off the bench. You need someone really to break out there. And maybe that's Jonathan Powell. Maybe we're not giving Jonathan Powell enough credit. But I think that Kyan Evans could potentially be that guy for you, because even if you do put Jaren Stevenson on the bench, this was a dude that shot 32% last year from 3 at Alabama. You look at how he's shooting so far early this year, it's not much better. It might even be worse to start out the season. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it certainly isn't anything to write home about. And so I think now you do wonder, what is the best thing for this team? Like I said, I don't know if you end up actually rolling him out there and making his first start against Georgetown for Derek Dixon. But I do think that you are getting to a point now where you have to at least evenly distribute the minutes. I mean, you look at last night, the minutes played, I think you could see something similar in this next game. 24 minutes for Derek Dixon, 16 minutes for Kyan Evans. Think if Derek Dixon is succeeding, then you're going to leave him on the floor. You're going to allow him to do the things that he needs to do. And the other thing is that, the reason why those minutes may have been distributed the way they were to that extent was because of the foul trouble for Kyan Evans. Well, if you can't stay out of foul trouble, then you're not going to be on the floor. So I think that's an area that Kyan has to clean up as well. Maybe then the minutes will be more even. But to me, you have to seriously have that conversation at this point. If you want to hold off because of Georgetown, then I get it. I think after that, that's when you probably turn to Derek, let him get a couple of starts under his belt, and then see how you feel. Let's take a recap of what we've seen this season. You have this moment from him against Kentucky, and then we'll see him against some of the teams that aren't necessarily nearly as good. Those teams that Kyan Evans was able to succeed against, is he able to succeed in the same way, put up similar numbers, and really, more so carry this offense and give them a much better feel in the half court? If he is, well, then there's your answer. That's your guy moving forward for the rest of the season. And I think, at this point, it's certainly possible. I don't think we thought that it would happen this quickly, but I think we always knew there was a chance this could happen just from the first time you laid eyes on Derek Dixon as a player, because he definitely looks like he's got some special traits about him.
Yeah, 2 things I'll follow up with what you had to say. If Derek Dixon can do what he did last night in Rupp in that environment, if Carolina's going to make the switch, you don't wait and worry about his first start being at home and against a good Georgetown team. Like if he proved last night, I think he's ready for showtime. The problem, and this is where I've come to with Kyan as, someone that was, I guess, personal defensive attorney, it felt like the first month of the season. He's played really 20 minutes of high-level basketball. And that was in the second half against Kansas. And that was with Seth Trimble. And you're getting Trimble back. It could be probably as soon as it's 2 weeks. He could be back before we get to Christmas, which would be a godsend with Carolina having, a game against Ohio State right before the holiday. But outside of that, like he played well against St. Bonaventure because the ball went in the basket. But outside of that, you haven't seen what he was supposed to be outside of the second half against Kansas, where he scored 12 points. And we've seen more games than not against lesser competition where he should be beating his man off the dribble. He should be doing all those things that I talked about so much in the offseason, and he just isn't. And look, I think he's just a guy that's still going through it. No one asks more of their point guard than Carolina. And we're on our third coach that asks a lot of them. Dean Smith did it, Roy Williams did it, and now Hubert Davis is doing it. But at some point you gotta play, and you gotta play to your potential. He hasn't done that, and it feels like Derek Dixon every time that he's been put in a pretty big spot and he's had to hold his own, he's been able to do just that. And so Derek Dixon I thought of him. I talked about him all summer as like the point guard of the future. The future very well could be Sunday, and this could be a move that I think Hubert Davis needs to strongly consider, but also realize you've got to bring Kyan Evans along in other ways because this team is going to need him. Without Seth Trimble, and even with Seth Trimble, they're going to need his perimeter shooting. So I think this will be something that we will monitor going into Sunday's game. And then how that game, if they stick with Kyan, we'll monitor how they look with Kyan Evans on the floor, when they bring Derek Dixon on the floor, so on and so forth. But I've seen enough. If Carolina wants to make the move and make Derek Dixon their starting point guard, you're not going to get any complaints from me. I want to talk a little bit more about the second half defense. Carolina in the first half gave up 31 points. So not a big point total, but Kentucky shot 50% from the field, and 28 of the 31 points came in the lane because they did not make a perimeter shot. So their only other source of offense, I believe, was they hit 1 2-pointer outside the lane, and then they had a free throw. That's a lot. 28 points puts you on pace for 56. They clamped down in the second half because they still give up 42, which is the big number. But Kentucky shoots just 8 of 23 from the field. Now, granted, part of that was they got Carolina in the bonus, and they were able to stay ahead while not making a field goal for 10 minutes because they were getting to the foul line and kind of supplementing their offense that way. But, I don't recall a game that Carolina played in on the road against a power conference opponent that was ranked, that has all the ability that Kentucky has, and they just took them completely out of what they wanted to do offensively. And the way I can tell you that it was just as much Carolina impacting the game as it was Kentucky missing shots, Kentucky just took 13 threes. That's not their MO. I mean, they usually take 13 threes and a half. They're not Louisville where they're bombs away shooting 40 threes per game, but they're going to put the ball up there from behind the three-point line quite a bit. And last night there was no perimeter shot to be had. I do think that was the benefit of Carolina's length. I thought they were just so freaking active in pick and rolls and their switches and just being in passing lanes and being, when they were coming off a pick and roll, they were right there to contest the shot to where Kentucky couldn't take a shot. I thought Jared Stevenson was massive for Carolina last night. His defense on Colin Chandler on the penultimate, defensive series, defensive stand was tremendous. Chandler goes baseline, but he makes him to where he has to hit a reverse layup. He basically hits the underside of the rim. Carolina's able to get a rebound. They go down the other way, and that would pretty much be all she wrote. It was everybody. And I think it was a toughness that we haven't seen from Carolina this year because they've been pretty adequate defensively, been really good. They've beaten up on some really bad offensive teams. They entered KenPom last night. I think it was 33rd in the country with their defensive rating. It jumped up 11 spots. They're up to 22nd after what they did last night. And I thought it was in large part a great attention to detail. And then part of it was just toughness, man. It felt like Carolina realized this is the way the game is going to be played. This is the way we're going to have to win the game. We got to dig in, and we got to get stops. And we got to get stops. We got to get stops. And let the offense find itself whenever it finds itself. And, I've raved about this team's ability to defend at a high level. I believe in it, but even I was not prepared to think they'd go on the road and hold Kentucky without a made basket for over 10 minutes in the second half of a tightly contested ball game.
Yeah, I mean, we thought, every time that Carolina would miss a shot, you were thinking this is finally the moment where Kentucky starts to string it together. And every single time, Carolina found a way to get a stop on the defensive end of the floor. I thought they did an amazing job on the perimeter of taking away any shot that Kentucky had out there. I mean, for you to hold this team to 13 shots from the outside, only hit one the entire game, is unbelievably impressive, because this was a team that came in shooting 29 per game from beyond the arc. That's a crazy, crazy number. I mean, you talked about, 40 for Louisville. That's like next level. I mean, you're talking about, you're not even thinking about taking a 2-point shot during the game. But, I mean, that's still 50th in the country. 3-point percentage, they were shooting 35% from three. That was 120th in the country. So, I mean, yeah, their percentages weren't mind-blowing, but it was certainly good enough where you thought, okay, that's going to be how they're going to produce some of their offense in this game. I mean, that's where Colin Chandler does a lot of his work. You pretty much took him completely out of the game at certain times because he was not shooting from beyond the arc. Yeah, he was able to drive inside and get a couple of looks on the interior and then eventually get to the foul line, but it wasn't, what he is normally used to. And then, the other guys in that backcourt, Otego Oweh, not a guy that's necessarily going to light it up from deep, but Denzel Aberdeen's a guy that normally is able to knock down a pretty decent amount of threes per game in his own right. And yet Carolina did everything that they needed to shut them down. And the thing is, they're doing this without their best perimeter defender. Like, if Seth Trimble was on the floor last night, it would have been more understandable. You're doing this without Seth Trimble. You had to throw Derek Dixon basically into the fire and say, hey, man, we're putting you out there and you got to stay out there because we really need you in this game. He ends up succeeding. And I mean, as you said, we've been talking about it all year with Jaren Stevenson. Just the hustle on that end of the floor is so great. And I think we saw it again last night. Yeah, were there times where Carolina was, having to, sort of run all over the place trying to cover guys when the ball would get passed around at certain points? Yeah, I thought early in the game that was the case. But as the game went along, Carolina really settled in. And I thought in that second half, Kentucky was able to score, but a lot of that came from the foul line. That was really where Kentucky was able to have their most success in that second half. And even still, they only scored 33 points in that second half. You allowed 31 in the first half. So, Carolina was, just as good, if not better, defensively in that second half, even though that was where they hit their 1-3. I thought it was just a tremendous performance from them. And let's hope this is what can continue moving forward for Carolina in some of these big games as they go throughout the rest of the non-conference and then once they get into conference play. Because if you're going to play this level of defense, then you have a chance to be a very successful team. I don't know how good this team can be offensively. I'm still wondering that because I still have questions about the half-court offense. I don't have any questions about this defense right now. I think they've shown through the early portion of the season that they are going to be one of the better ones that we've seen here at Carolina. Maybe it's not going to be the best in the country. It's not going to be like Houston, but it's certainly going to be one that's going to give Carolina a chance to win every single night, no matter who the opponent is. And last night, that was very comforting because it felt like if that defense wasn't there, this could have been a game that Kentucky ran away from Carolina.
Yeah, okay. Carolina's half-court offense can be much better if they do the next two things that we're going to talk about. Offensive rebounding has been a staple of this program my entire life. To the point where, I enjoy watching Carolina miss shots because I just love watching my guys go get offensive rebounds. It's how you break a defense as well. It's just like running the ball in football, man. There's nothing more demoralizing than when you play great defense for 20, 25, 30 seconds, you force up a shot, but you don't get the ball because they go get the ball. And Carolina did that so many times. And it felt like throwback Carolina basketball where our best offense isn't going to be our initial offense. It's going to be our second chance offense because we're just going to grab the ball. And a lot of it, I mean, like, you can teach rebounding techniques and getting inside the hip of your defender and all that. And Carolina does do that. Rebounding comes down to effort. And I thought there was just a relentless energy from Vassar, from Caleb Wilson. I thought Jared Stevenson had a couple big tap outs for offensive rebounds that were really massive as well. And it felt like it broke Kentucky's will because while they were struggling to put the ball in the basket on one end, they would go down the other way and play really good defense and force Carolina to make a tough shot. The way they defended Caleb Wilson last night, hopefully he learns from that because that's the way he's going to be defended a lot here moving forward. But the way that they defended initially was great. It was great. It was great defense. And Carolina was missing shots, but they weren't there to get rebounds. And you get 20 offensive rebounds, you get a season high 22 second chance points. So just a little bit over 1 point per offensive rebound. Like maybe you think that number should be higher, but I think that rate you're just getting greedy. But that's what I think. That's what Hubert Davis expects. Maybe not 20 every game, but this should be one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the country. And he said in his post-game press conference that, now I can tell them this is what you're capable of doing because you just went there and did it. And we've seen glimpses of that. There have been some games where Carolina has been overwhelming on the offensive glass against some of these inferior opponents they played down in quad 4. But you've had some other games where they were kind of nowhere to be found. Hopefully this is something that becomes a part of what this team is going to do night in, night out. Because if they're going to go on the road and win some games in conference play this year, they're going to have to do so when they don't shoot the ball all that well. And the best way to overcome a bad shooting night is to grab your misses and get second chance points. And that was solely the reason why Carolina had a chance in this game was because they grabbed 20 of their misses and converted in the 22 second chance points.
Yeah, Carolina turned the ball over 12 times in this game. And in a game where you turned it over 12 times and your opponent turned it over 9 times, you were able to have 11 more field goal attempts in the game than your opponent was. On a night where we were saying, dude, Carolina's turning the ball over at not a ridiculous rate, but it was the type of turnovers that Carolina was giving Kentucky. We thought, dude, there's no way Carolina's going to be able to. I mean, this is going to be a ton of possessions for Kentucky, and Carolina's not necessarily going to be able to keep up. But that was if you weren't paying attention to the offensive rebounding. I mean, the offensive rebounding was phenomenal. And that was the best that they have rebounded in terms of just watching the way that they rebounded the basketball, how aggressive they were going for the basketball. That's what you said. It's all about effort. And yeah, it definitely is about effort. But I mean, we've talked about it so many times. Guys are batting at the basketball. They're just not getting their both hands on the ball. You didn't see that last night. You saw guys with manly rebounds, the way that you needed to rebound. And it created these second chance opportunities for Carolina. And look, first half, Carolina wasn't necessarily converting on nearly as many of those opportunities as they probably should have. I mean, they had 11 offensive rebounds. They had 9 second chance points. But in the second half, they did a much better job of turning those second chance points into or turning those second chance opportunities into points. And so they finished the game with 22. I think that's what you want to see, is that Carolina is able to create these extra opportunities for their guys. And I mean, the thing is that you look at that, I mean, that's with you only hitting 6 threes in the game. So it wasn't like Carolina was kicking out for a lot of threes. These were buckets that you then had to re-earn if you were Carolina. So what a great job by this group. I thought, as the night went along, they got better finishing at the rim. I thought there were some chances early on that they had to finish and just couldn't come up with it. But I think as the game went along, they got better in that area. And yeah, it's the main reason why Carolina was able to win this game, because as you said, it can really break the will of a team when you play great defense for the entirety of the shot clock and Carolina is able to come down with an offensive rebound, get a reset, and then sometimes even come down with another offensive rebound and get a reset. And so it takes so much time off the clock. I think that's really what Carolina was able to do late in the game, was they were just able to basically shorten the game and say, hey, we're not shooting great either, but we're going to shorten it, and then we're just going to have to make our shots when they come. And Carolina did that. So that was huge as well. That was huge for sure. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those types of efforts on the glass. You should have this saved for later in the season when Carolina needs it. I mean, we talked about there have been some good defensive rebounding efforts that Carolina has put on so far this year. There hasn't been this type of game so far. And part of it is that you could say Carolina was missing a lot of shots in this game against some of the mid-majors. They weren't necessarily missing as many shots. But even still, you haven't seen this dominant of a performance on the offensive glass. And Carolina did it in one of the biggest games that they had all season. So tip of the cap to guys like Caleb Wilson, who, Kentucky did a really good job defensively against outside of what he was able to do on the glass. Henry Vassar, Jaron Stevenson pulling down a couple of offensive rebounds, even Jonathan Powell, who has made that, something of a thing that he does coming off the bench. That's what you want to see from these guys. I said it, everybody needed a rebound in this game, and it really felt like when Carolina needed some clutch rebounds, they were able to do so.
Tip of the cap also needs to go to Hubert Davis. I thought his play calling last night was exceptional. I may have this wrong, but I don't think I do. Out of all 4 timeouts that Carolina has, and they actually called all 4 of them last night, they got a bucket out of every timeout. They got one in the first half after Jaron Stevenson falls on the loose ball, calls a heads-up timeout. They come out of that. They run shin action. You get Jonathan Powell on the wing for a 3, and he makes it. And then the final 2.5 minutes, 3 timeouts, 3 buckets. You get one with the Luka Bogovac 3, which was the design play to get him the ball there, and he hits it. You get the Derek Dixon 3 to make it 64-62. No, not the first option, but was definitely, I think probably the message was, hey, if this isn't there, you're going to have to probably take a perimeter shot. Carolina gets a bucket out of that. And then you get the game-winning layup from Derek Dixon. That was phenomenal. And I thought, what Carolina did was they put Malachi Marino in a conflict. And it's a conflict that last year there would have been no conflict. He just would have challenged Derek Dixon's shot. But because Vassar's, first off, such a great screener, was able to get Dixon clean off the screen so he get downhill. But because Vassar is such a great roller, and then when he rolls, he finishes because he dunks the ball, Marino had to pick and choose. Does he lift and try to challenge the shot, or does he stay with Vassar and see what happens? And he stays with Vassar because he doesn't want to give up, that layup. And look, Dixon still had to make a shot. And Hubert Davis told him it's got to be a left-handed layup, and that's a drill that they practice in practice. And he goes in there and he makes the play. Hubert doesn't call a lot of plays. He's not a controlling coach. That's not who he is. That's not what he does. He does allow his guys to play free. But in a game like last night, he needed to draw sets. He needed to draw plays. And Carolina was 4 for 4. And primarily you go 3 for 3 in the final 2.5. And if those possessions, if you get one miss, if they just go 2 of 3 in those situations, the game probably turns out differently. And I felt good for him because look at some of the games that Carolina's lost close. Lost a couple last year where I thought he drew up good plays, shots didn't go. 2 years ago at Georgia Tech, RJ Davis was effectively fouled on a game-winning shot attempt. The whistle wasn't called, but these were all great sets that Hubert Davis had drawn up. Just wasn't able to get the beneficiary of the ball going in the basket. And I thought last night his team needed him. His team needed him to help them find something in the half court. And whether it's him, whether it's Brad Frederick, whoever it is, the fact they were able to put something together to help them, I think goes a long way. I mean, I think it should invoke confidence in Hubert Davis to where if he wants to be a little bit more controlling, a little bit more managing of what Carolina is trying to do and trying to accomplish, have that confidence that if you call a play, it's going to work. Because last night, he was calling plays like Dave Canales calling plays on Sundays for the Carolina Panthers. They were home run after home run, and Carolina needed every single one of them to come away with a win.
Yeah, I mean, he was phenomenal. And this is the thing that I think when we debate some of these people about Hubert Davis, this is one thing that comes up that's very polarizing. There are a lot of people that believe that he doesn't really do a good job of drawing things up out of timeouts. And a lot of it is execution. I mean, we've seen it so many times that it's just not executed right. And for some reason, they are willing to blame Hubert. They are not willing to blame the players. When, the last few years, it really has been a lot about the players. Now, I'm not saying that every play that Hubert draws up is just magical and he's the greatest mind that we've ever seen at drawing up plays or anything like that. But last night, when you draw up those plays late in the game and you get the end results that Carolina gets out of them, that shows you just how good of a strategic coach he actually is. And so I believe that to me, that was a huge statement towards anyone that is doubting him at this point, that, he is able to basically will his kids to a win. I mean, we've seen it. One thing that you can never question about Hubert, no matter if you question the ability to draw up plays or not, you can never question the fact that he cares, because we've seen it on the sidelines this year. I mean, you saw it last night if you watched, and especially going into the locker room. I mean, just as fired up as we've seen Hubert all season, just unhappy with the way that Carolina had played. And I thought that as the game went along, you could see that he was basically just trying to will his team to victory. And he said at one point, let me just take over. We got these timeouts. We've got these possessions down the stretch. Let me take over and let me help these guys out. And I thought that was the best that Carolina's offense looked all night. So, I mean, yeah, credit to him, man. He deserves a huge shout out for what he did last night. And I really hope that moving forward, it allows Carolina fans to trust him. This was a huge win for Carolina as a program, but this is a massive win for Hubert Davis as a head coach too, right up there with Kansas. And so I think now it really should take the pressure off of him here the rest of non-conference play. Once they get into conference play, then it depends on how it looks there. It depends on some of the teams that Carolina is going to face and what those end results are. But for right now, we can stop having the conversation that everybody is just dying to have about him, because the two games that he needed to win, he found a way to do so, and it was in large part because of his coaching.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And that's where I was going next. Michael Coe tweeted out, biggest win for Carolina since when? It's 2024 at Duke, where Carolina clinched their ACC regular season championship outright. That's the last time they won on the road against a ranked opponent. And you could say, well, it was just over a year ago. But, for Carolina, we're used to winning these games. Like, we play in them all the time. We're used to winning them. And no, have we won them at the rate that we want to win them at under Hubert? No, we haven't. That's facts. But you look at last night, and I think he was as big a reason why that they did win. And the narrative about him needs to change. And I hope last night was the beginning of that. The Kentucky Network sent this tweet out last night. I love Mark Pope. We all want him to be the guy. You do not lose to Hubert Davis at home. That first sentence is pretty much what all anti-Hubert Davis people have said. I love Hubert. We want him to be the guy. Then they go into rip again. Well, I quote tweeted this, and I put in the quotations, can't lose to Hubert at home. And then I follow up by saying, quote, I didn't realize losing to a national coach of the year, an ACC coach of the year, and a Final Four coach was such a jarring defeat. At some point, man, we've got to differentiate. Hubert Davis ain't Matt Doherty. Is he Roy Williams? Is he Dean Smith? No, he's not. He's not there. Not yet. I hope he puts his name in that conversation because he wins as many games and his national championships of those two guys. But this isn't some slappy, guys. And what we talked about it all summer. What he's done at 99% of the other schools in this conference, these schools would beg for it. Everyone except Duke would look at what Hubert Davis has accomplished and say, heck yeah, I'd take that. Heck yeah, I'd sign up for that. Because, he's coaching the Final Four. He's an offensive rebound away from winning a national championship.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like Kevin Ollie at UConn, where it was literally just a run. Kevin Ollie rode Shabazz Napier's hot month to a national championship and then proceeded to run that UConn program into the ground. Hubert Davis has had a second act. 2 years ago, he won 29 games, won an ACC regular season title, made an ACC tournament final, was a 1 seed and made the Sweet 16. Like, what we're wanting is what we saw last night to happen more consistently because we're spoiled rotten Carolina fans. And by God, we win those games more often than we lose. But I'm just I was appalled by the way Kentucky fans were reacting to who they got beaten by. Like, he's a good basketball coach. He's a quality basketball coach that's still learning how to run his program in the NIL world, who's still learning how to run his program in the revenue sharing world. Carolina finally saw the light. They understood that if they want to win, they got to pay. They're paying players now the way you got to pay players. They went and got him a GM to help him construct a roster. So it's not always all that. So all the pressure isn't on him. And I know that I've become like Hubert's guy, but I think people need to realize he's a really good basketball coach. And I thought Dick Vitale kind of pointed that out at different points last night. You heard it from Jay Williams. The way Kentucky reacted after losing to him was disgusting. The way I thought Kansas fans acted by getting beaten by him was disgusting. I hope Duke fans are prepared to respond after he beats them because he's going to beat Duke. I hope NC State fans are prepared because he's going to beat NC State. The narrative around Hubert needs to change, and I hope last night was the changing of the guard for the way our head coach gets talked about by our own fan base and national college basketball fans around the world.
I mean, I think the own fan base is the thing that I'm worried about the most, is just changing the narrative to where we don't have to argue with everybody every single time that there is a loss that Carolina has. I mean, yeah, we were arguing with people after the Michigan State game. People were that quick to jump on them and forget about the win over Kansas. Yeah, this is what's so crazy, right? Is that when you are critical of other coaches, people get mad and are furious. But with Hubert Davis, when you're supporting him, it seems like people are incredibly angry at the fact that you would support him. Well, how could you possibly do this? I mean, guys, he took this team to the brink of a national title in his first year as a head coach. Now, in his first year under what is the correct way that you should be formatting your basketball program, it's looking like he's off to a really strong start. I mean, you've got 2 wins that, I mean, who knows? And maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe these wins turn out to be terrible. Maybe, Kentucky just fully drops off. Mark Pope gets fired after the season. They have a year where they're finished below 500. Maybe Kansas just absolutely falls apart after their loss last night to UConn. And we're talking about a team that doesn't make the NCAA tournament. I don't think that either one of those things are going to happen. I think that both of those wins are going to remain significant. And I think that we're going to be talking about those wins as some special ones for Hubert Davis and just part of the season that Hubert Davis is putting together, because Hubert Davis is a good basketball coach. You're right. If this was anywhere else, they would not be talking about him like this. But this is Carolina. And so that with that comes expectations. But I think, yeah, you're right. You need to differentiate everybody that wants this to be Matt Doherty 2.0. Because I don't know. And again, I've said I have absolutely no idea why people are so crazed to have this actually turn out to be that. Because if it does, again, who is saving Carolina? Who is that savior that's coming out of nowhere to take over this job? Because there's not the obvious guy like Roy Williams. So I think these wins, you would hope that this would start to turn the narrative for some Tar Heel fans. But I read the replies that you got last night, and there are plenty of Tar Heel fans in there talking about how this win doesn't really mean much. We have to see this more consistently for this to be able to happen. I mean, guys, he's had 2 or 3 massive tests so far this season. He's passed 2 of them with flying colors. The other one didn't necessarily go his way, but I'm going to tell you, that Michigan State team, that looks like a team that's on a mission, because this might be Tom Izzo's last chance, and they certainly look like they are stacked to be one of the better teams in all of college basketball this year. I don't look at that loss and say that's a bad loss for Carolina. And so I think that, the narrative around him, hopefully it does start to change for Carolina fans. But am I holding out hope? Am I holding my breath on that? Absolutely no chance.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it changes after they continue to build off of this. I pray to God they don't have a letdown performance on Sunday, because they'll be out with their pitchforks. But you mentioned he's 2-1 in Carolina's 3 big games they played so far. And the 2 wins are the 2 games that if we had to pick and choose, hey, you get to pick 2 wins. Which games are you picking?
Yep.
We were picking Kansas at home. We were picking at Kentucky, just because of what those games mean and what those games represent. Those are fellow blue blood programs that have, Kentucky beaten Carolina back-to-back times. Kansas, we haven't beaten Kansas since 2003 before or 2002 since this season, before this season. And he wins those games in different fashion, by the way, which should give you belief that this can be a really good basketball team, because they were able to beat Kansas in the second half down by 8, because they just played brilliantly on offense. Last night they go on the road and they have to, roll up their sleeves, pick up their lunch pail, put on their hard hat and grind out a win. And they were tough enough to do that. And that's all a reflection of their head coach and what he and his staff are doing with this group. And we also got to remember, for as much, man, as we love and celebrated RJ and Armando, this is the first roster that was Hubert Davis's roster. First time he got to handpick what the guys looked like 1 through 15. Right now they're 7-1. They've already got more quad 1 wins this year than they had in their entire season a year ago. And they're already in a higher position in the net than they were at any point last year. Still a long way to go, but they're really positioning themselves to be a contender this year in the ACC and across the country. We got to get out of here because you got to go and get to work. So let's go ahead and hand out our game balls, and then we'll wrap up this edition of the show. I'll go first. I'll hand out game balls, and I'll give it. Derek Dixon probably is the one that deserves it. But I will go with Henry Vassar, because I don't know if Carolina wins the game without his 17 points, 10 rebounds, 8 of 12 from the field, played 36 minutes, had some massive dunks in the second half. I thought did a much better job contesting shots at the rim as well. And so, last night was a test, I thought, for him, with the way that, now Kentucky without Mohamed Diabate, but Malachi Moreno was a former top-flight recruit, someone that Carolina fans were upset when he chose to go to Lexington instead of coming to Chapel Hill. And I thought another test that Henry Vassar passed. He gets my game ball for last night's performance in the win at Kentucky.
Yeah, Henry was sensational. Definitely deserves one. I think you got to give it to Derek Dixon. I mean, down the stretch to hit those 2 shots that you hit, especially, the lay-in is special. The 3-pointer, to have that confidence, to find a way to create that little bit of separation and knock that shot down is amazing for a freshman that, when you look at it, you weren't expecting him to play that type of role this early in the season. So, what a tremendous job by him. Carolina needed him to step up when really nobody else outside of Vassar was able to do anything remotely successful at times in that second half. There were moments where Caleb Wilson had some shots that ended up going down, especially as they got late, but you knew they were going to try to take those guys away. He steps up, he makes the plays, 9 points, 3 of 8 from the field, 1 of 4 from beyond the arc, 2 of 2 at the foul line, which is not nothing considering that Carolina struggled to shoot at the foul line once again, and also has 3 rebounds and dishes out 2 assists. It's the reason why we talked about him potentially being point guard number 1 here for Carolina moving forward, and so he deserves the game ball, and I'll give it to him.
Yeah, I also want to shout out, Caleb Wilson, not the best night he's had so far during his Carolina career. A fifth straight double-double, 15-12, was just 5 of 19 from the field. Hubert raves about his passing, 6 assists last night. That's got to become a bigger part of what he's doing because the double teams are not going to stop. They're not going to slow down. He's got to be prepared to make the play that needs to be made when he gets doubled. He did a much better job of that last night than he did against Michigan State. An underrated reason why Carolina came away with the victory. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Big day on the website. Full coverage of Carolina's win at Kentucky can be found. The recap article has been posted, but it's National Signing Day in college football. A big day for Carolina. They signed their 40-man class with some surprise flips that came to Carolina that were supposed to maybe go somewhere else prior to today. All that has been covered for you guys on the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. Get all your basketball news, all your football news. We'll be with that. We'll be with you through the rest of the basketball season and the football off season. So make sure you get there every single day for great Carolina content. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. If you consume the podcast digitally, the best way to keep up with us, like the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or go ahead and follow me at Twitter, HTB_Josh. You'll see more of my great tweets, but also once we go live, all 3 of those places will notify you. You can jump right in and be a part of the conversation. But with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.